Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session as part of UAE Connect 2021. This session is entitled UAE Companies Law, Key Developments in 2021. And for those of you that are aware, you'll have seen some developments happen last year towards the tail end that have continued into this year. So we're delighted to actually go into this in a little bit more detail, what this means for UK companies and how you can look to adapt accordingly. So we're going to be delighted to be joined by Hugh Fraser, who is Managing Partner for HFI Net Zero Legal Solutions, who will talk us through this. And for those of you who have met Hugh in the past will know that he is a very experienced lawyer in the region and will hopefully answer some of the questions at the end for a Q&A session that we have established. So before we carry on, I'd just really like to go through the housekeeping that I know we've done throughout the course of this two-day event. But I think it's important for those that are joining us for the first time. Any questions that you would like to ask, and we would actively encourage you to put any of them forward, you can do so by typing them into the chat function that you'll see on the drop-down menu towards the right-hand side. And that allows you to put these questions to Hugh or myself at the end of the session, and we'll make sure that we put together an ample amount of time in order to cover these questions for you. Likewise, for any technical issues that you're encountering, we have got a team who are working actively in the background to ensure that any technical issues are overcome. But should you encounter anything, just please click on the live support and we'll get back to that as soon as possible. I'd now like to thank our sponsors that we have here. So we have some gold sponsors helping to support the two-day event that we have. So we have Al Yassir and Enderson Hauser, who I'd like to personally thank for their support for this event. And we have a number of silver and bronze sponsors. So our silver sponsors, Medad Holding, ProServe, Unit Burwelco, and then we have our bronze sponsors, the British Business Group Abu Dhabi, Corotherm International, HFI Net Zero Legal Solutions, who you're about to hear from, and Hugh Fraser, Petrofac, SGS, S&C Lavalin, and Stats Group. Now, all of the aforementioned companies will be available for you to meet with during the virtual exhibition space at the breaks that we have scheduled throughout the course of the day. So I would encourage you to do so, give you a chance to engage with these companies, find out a little bit more about what it is they do, the products and services that they have on offer. So please take the time to go and see them before the day finishes today. And you never know, you might actually be matched with some of them as well through our speedy networking sessions. I'd also like to thank our partners, supporting partners that have supported this event. So we have the Department for International Trade, Scottish Development International, the UAE UK Business Council, and the British Business Group. Now, before I welcome up our speaker, Hugh, I'm going to read out Hugh's bio here, but I can probably start a bit by saying that Hugh has been a gentleman that I met, in fact, my very first week here when I rocked up in the UAE to start working here over 10 years ago. And there's many people will tell you exactly the same sort of story. Hugh has been a stalwart for helping UK companies out here in the UAE and in fact across the region. It's been an honour to know him for that 10-year period, and he's always throughout that period as well been a strong supporter of the EIC. So when we put this session together, which I think is extremely topical, I could think of no one better to have than Hugh. And I would say to those of you that haven't met him before, extremely approachable. His team are on hand in the virtual exhibition, so you get a chance to hear more about what it is they can offer. But also, for any sort of legal advice that you would look to have within the region, this is definitely one of the people you would want to talk to. So now I go in the official bio. So HFI Net Zero Legal Solutions specialises in supporting client business to diversify and grow within the net zero economy. It's led by Hugh Fraser, who is the founding and managing partner of HFI Consulting, which provides specialist consulting and legal services to energy and water sector companies with advanced technology and know-how in relation to their international business ventures in the Middle East and North Africa region. Hugh is a Scottish corporate commercial lawyer, originally from Aberdeen, and has been based in the Middle East for 17 years, with more than 13 years experience in the international energy sector. He was the managing partner of the Middle East office of Andrews Kurth, Kenyan law firm, from 2013 to 2017, founder and managing partner of Hugh Fraser International Legal Consultancy from 2003 to 2013, and the former group head of legal at John Wood Group PLC from 96 to 2003. And the link is still there for those of you that were with us yesterday. Wood provided the contractor briefing in the afternoon. He established HFI Consulting International on 1st of August 2017, including the relaunch of HFI Legal Consultancy. Hugh is on the Middle East Advisory Panel for the UK Energy Industries Council. He's a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers and European Association of Geoscientists and Engineers. He was appointed to the Scottish Enterprise Global International Business Advisory Network in May 2017. Hugh, it is a pleasure to have you on board with us this afternoon, and I'll now welcome you to the floor, and we'll look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I very much appreciate that introduction and the invitation to speak at this event today. It's really great to be back in the EIC forum and to get this opportunity to discuss what I think is a fairly topical theme and of huge interest to clients and connections. I really wanted just to mention at the outset that I obviously can't mention anything that is client-specific, confidential. I can only speak really in general terms from the kind of wider experience. And as always, I don't have the copyright on these issues. There's always something that someone may have a different angle or view on, but I'm going to give you a run through as kind of I see it. And we're still learning a lot about the new regime, which is now coming into place. So if I can just move down the slides, I hope I've got control. Yeah. First of all, a couple of acknowledgements. Can I really say a big thank you to two of my collaboration firms. The Al Yusea group in Abu Dhabi been hugely helpful to me in working through the nuts and bolts of how some of these things work in practice, and indeed the Hussein Luta and Associates Law Office in Dubai, who have been our affiliated UAE legal specialists since 2003. So my sincere thanks to these firms who have been very helpful in putting this presentation together today, and indeed building up the know-how which is in this. What I'm going to cover today is I'm going to talk you through, really put this in context of where we've come to today, the story so far. I'm going to say a little bit about the prior and in some ways the existing regime. I'm going to talk through what has changed. I'm going to ask the question, okay, if we get 100% foreign ownership coming through here, are there strings attached? I'm going to look at the key players who will be involved in putting this new framework together and into action. I'm going to talk about the key drivers which will impact on how this rolls out. I will also say a little bit putting the UAE in context with what is happening across the region on this theme. And I'm going to stick my neck out at the end and maybe set out one or two predictions, see if I'm proven right in the next few years or wrong. But I'm going to roll out how I see this is going to impact on businesses. First of all, the story so far, well, I guess we need to really go back to the mid-80s when the 51% rule, as we call it, was introduced in the UAE, requiring companies to have 51% of any limited liability company, with some exceptions, register the name of a UAE national or a company wholly owned by one or more UAE nationals. At the same time, on a parallel track, we saw the rise of the free zones, particularly in Dubai. That kicked off in the mid-80s with the Jebel Ali free zone, which has been a huge success and spawned literally dozens of free zones throughout the UAE, but only a few which I think are really, frankly, relevant to the energy sector. There was talk in 2000 this rule was going to be changed, removed, but nothing actually came of it. There was a further iteration of the process in 2014, I think, frankly, driven by the pressures being exerted by the oil price crash of that year. But in 2015, the I guess the promised changes to the legislation didn't actually happen, and things remained as they were. However, there was momentum, and by 2018 there was a foreign direct investment law passed in the UAE, which opened the door to 100% foreign ownership outside the free zones, or onshore as we call it. And indeed, towards the end of last year, there were specific, we call them the positive list regulations by cabinet resolution, which gave a bit more colour into the types of businesses which would be entitled to 100% ownership. And I'll say a little bit more about that as we go through these slides. Okay, so where are we starting from? Well, I guess a number of key issues here. If you've been doing business or wanting to do business in Abu Dhabi, you really probably had three options historically. You would set up a commercial agency with a local partner. You would set up a foreign company branch registration, and that also had a connectivity to what we call a local service agent, a local company who was supposed to support the branch. The classic 5149 limited liability company. Those tended to be, frankly, what you would see in Abu Dhabi. There has been reference over the years to free zones, but I have to say that in my experience, certainly from an Abu Dhabi perspective, the free zone piece really hasn't moved, although I've got something to say on that today a bit later. Certainly though up in Dubai, very different story with Jebel Ali, and indeed in recent years, the DMCC free zone, which really has formed a particularly strong niche in what it does. There are free zones in Abu Dhabi, Masdar City probably being the most well-known in an energy context. And I think as we move into net zero, I can see the Masdar initiative really getting a major reboot as part of this process. Everything is licensed according to very clearly defined license codes. If you're doing certain types of activities, you will need all those activities to be licensed. Historically, the oil and gas activities have required a Supreme Petroleum Council approval. And then beyond the purely legal framework, it's been a question of satisfying what ADNOC in particular have required in terms of procurement policies and vendor registration policies. And indeed, one of the biggest changes in recent years has been the rolling out of the in-country value, the ICB localization plans. And indeed, that has very clearly, in my experience, made certain clients set up new business structures in Abu Dhabi to really maximize their ICV scoring. One other point I'd mention on this slide is there has been a reference to what we call dual licenses. This is specific to Abu Dhabi, where they've been encouraging SMEs to really try and procure more for government contracts. And they have been allowing free zone companies in Abu Dhabi, I should stress, in Abu Dhabi, to apply for dual licenses. But that does seem to be restricted to the SME community at this stage. Now, moving on to the specific question, well, what actually has changed, and would it affect your particular business? We need to bear in mind that there is what they call a negative list. These are types of businesses where it is the strategy that these businesses will remain as they are with local ownership rules. So exploration and production of petroleum, really no surprises there. Recent joint venture investment models involving ADNOC have been typically 60% equity position to ADNOC and 40% to foreign partners. That has been the trend for a number of years now. Likewise, the water and electricity utilities, and I should stress that's up at the utilities level. It would not necessarily catch specialist service or technology providers in that sector, but at the utilities level, that is being retained on what we call the negative list. And also to be a commercial agent in the UAE will still require 100% local ownership to run that business. And those rules really were set down in 2018. However, moving on to the positive list, the 2020 regulations that I referred to earlier introduced well over 100 types of businesses which could qualify for 100% foreign ownership. I have to say my initial look through the list, I felt it was probably a little bit light from the energy point of view, but we'll see how this rolls out. Construction of floating structures, for example, would obviously cover offshore wind structures, but as we've seen earlier, just how much of that are we going to see in the region in the short term, perhaps a question mark. There are some, I'm going to switch over to the second page, there are some specific services on this list, if the slides can catch up with me. Yeah. So a number of bullet points I've picked out of the list where there may, and I stress may be, perhaps an opening door here for certain types of businesses. Interestingly, the holding of intellectual property rights right at the end there, you can set up your IP holding company now, 100% owned in the UAE. Renting, leasing of machinery and equipment, to what extent will that be allowed through into the energy sector? We'll need to see. Technical testing and analysis, there's a door open there, certainly for some of my clients, I suspect, to investigate further. So we're still looking and learning at this, but the door is opened, and we'll see if this list of codes, in fact, it obviously could grow. There's nothing to stop the government introducing supplementary regulations to this list. Are there strings attached? Well, I think, frankly, yes, there are. A number of things I think is going to happen in response to this. Some of these 100% licensed codes will require significant investment. Certain of the manufacturing codes will require up to $30 million equivalent in local currency. I think there'll be a very strong onus towards minimum local employment and localization commitments as part of this. There is specific reference to other restrictions and conditions which the regulatory authorities can impose as part of the process. We suspect the license fees might be higher for this type of company. There are sanctions if the restrictions and conditions are not complied with. And perhaps we'll see as a counterbalance, perhaps 100% ownership is going to mean perhaps a bit more taxation. We have seen 5% VAT introduced in the UAE about 3 years ago. The VAT in Saudi was up from 5% to 15% last year, which came as a little bit of a surprise to us. So I'm afraid the taxation genie is pretty much out of the bottle and may be a counterbalance to liberalizing the foreign ownership rules. We'll need to just wait and see. So moving on, just I'm not going to dwell on this slide, really just to say that the Ministry of Economy, a number of specialist units and authorities, feeding into that ministry will be governing this. There will be a register of foreign direct investments, and I've mentioned at the bottom there, there is the propensity and the capability to go for special approvals. So just because something isn't on the positive list doesn't mean to say that you could bring in a specific, very attractive project to the authorities and see if you can get a special dispensation to go on the list and to get approval. So what are the key drivers? Very much in line with looking to drive forward UAE strategic national plans. We're looking for projects which do add value to the economy. We're looking for innovation. They're looking for employment and training, technology transfer, compatible with sustainable environmental protection. I do want to maybe just focus on impact on local companies there, because I think will there be a negative angle there that if you're doing something which is going to squeeze out local companies, this may not be particularly attractive to the licensing authorities. However, if you are bringing in perhaps on a joint venture basis a project which will see technology transfer into a local company from a positive point of view, obviously that's going to be looked upon favorably. So how does this match up across the region? Well, we're obviously seeing the UAE, it's got a very, very well developed 100% owned a foreign ownership permitted free zone infrastructure. It's now beginning to transition onshore, but I do think probably with some strings attached to it. We'll have to wait and see. Saudi Arabia has been 100% foreign ownership status for a long time now. There is obviously higher taxation in Saudi Arabia, but 100% foreign ownership in the kingdom goes back almost 20 years now, I guess. Oman has increased recently from 70% to 100%. Bahrain has been 100%, as has Egypt for a long time now. Kuwait, Qatar, and Iraq, pretty much still, I would say, 49% maximum foreign ownership territory. There is 100% legislation in place both in Kuwait and Qatar, but it does seem to be that this is being applied for perhaps large-scale projects, one-off specific projects of some scale. But we'll see how that evolves as well. So I think to finish up, some bold and perhaps unwise predictions, we'll see. I wanted to stress the 51% rule remains the default position, and a special approval is needed to move away from it. I've heard talk about the 51% rule has been abolished. That is not correct. It remains the default position. However, it is a foot in the door. The direction of travel is there, and perhaps some of the regional competition aspects have shown up on the last slide will impact on how this rolls out and how quickly it rolls out. We'll need to wait and see. I suspect perhaps like Kuwait and like Qatar, there may be a particular focus on high value FDI projects or advanced technology ventures. That may well be where the initial focus lies. Certainly, I think it's going to be business as usual, certainly in the foreseeable future for the Dubai free zones. They've got a much, I guess, wider international and regional role than purely the UAE, so I can't see huge negative impacts on them. In fact, in the case of the DMCC free zone, I think they've got a significant opportunity to grab a large share of what would have previously gone to companies in offshore jurisdictions. That's becoming, I think, increasingly frowned upon for disclosure, taxation, compliance reasons. It's very much harder now to bank through offshore locations, and I think DMCC, which has got a superb, highly regulated, highly automated system, I think has got a huge opportunity to win a large share of that business. In Abu Dhabi, well, will we see the commercial agencies, branches, 51% companies disappearing? Certainly not overnight. We'll need to measure what is going to be the impact on existing ventures, the impact on local partners. There's a lot of financial commercial structures built in to these existing businesses, which will need to be adjusted. I was asked, does this legislation apply only to new projects? Can you adapt an existing one? Some commentators have said it's got to be an initiative starting after September 2018. Frankly, I've seen nothing to say that restriction is necessarily in place. So I wouldn't rule out trying to adapt an existing venture, but I think it will be harder to persuade the authorities to adapt something that's already in place. They're looking for inward, new FDI coming into the country. If the experience in Saudi is anything to experience as 100% foreign ownership came into play, but increasing localization, increasing taxation came into play, equity, shared, dual investment, joint venture companies became very much to the fore. And that remains a business model which, for me, often is the way to a successful venture in Saudi. So will we see these existing structures evolve and morph into a more classic, traditional joint venture company structure? And trade-offs, yeah, I'm afraid, scale of investment, localization, perhaps more taxation in the mix. It's going to be a seesaw with these things balancing up. So I think just to finish off, can I again please just reiterate my thanks to the EIC for the invitation today, and can again thank my friends and colleagues at the Al Yasir Group, especially Khalid Al-Kubaisi, who knows recently joined the EIC Board of Directors, and Hussein Luta and his team at the Luta Law Firm in Dubai. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugh, for that insight. It's always interesting, and I like what you finished on as well in terms of your thoughts for what we see perhaps taking place over the next 12 months, and it will be interesting to look back and see what has developed, because I think, if anything, history has taught us here that it's always a fast evolving market, and we can't always anticipate what's in front of us. And probably the prime example we talked about was the introduction of the VAT, and then that trebling in Saudi very quickly from starting at a low base rate. A few questions, and again, just to anyone that's on the call here, any of the attendees that would like to put the questions to Hugh, please put them into the chat function and we'll get them asked. Obviously, the last 12 months has been very difficult, Hugh, with the advent of COVID, making it difficult for companies to come out and travel. And by virtue of that, we're doing events like today, virtually. But you still see the UAE as an attractive market for UK companies to set up in?
Yes, very much so. I mean, I've been back in my Woodrup days, based back in Aberdeen. The UAE was very clearly, from a very early stage in my career, what was just pivotal, not just for what was happening in country, but regionally and internationally. You know, I know people who run businesses from the UAE who've got very little business activity in the UAE and indeed in the region. It remains a very attractive place to base an Eastern Hemisphere company. Its quality of life, it's still, despite what was said about taxation evolving, it's still a very benign taxation environment. And of course, with the ability to own business, investment structures 100%, it will increase, in my view, the attractiveness of the country. And I did mention specifically the DMCC Free Zone initiative, which I think has been absolutely fantastic, very well run, very well automated, great systems. And I do think companies which might have used offshore structures in the past may well be looking more at the likes of the DMCC offerings. So I can see a lot of growth out of this. The trend's always been, I think, in the right direction, and I think nothing will change. I think it will strengthen.
Well, what do you see as with this new arrangement that's still coming into play? What do you see as the main challenges, or the main challenge with the current setup?
Well, I think that there's always been, I think, a high degree of agnosticism on European and US clients, mine are mainly private equity backed. When you have to explain to them that they can only hold 49% of an onshore Abu Dhabi LLC, it immediately means, okay, well, if we have to do it, it disincentivizes building more into that structure. So perhaps, a venture based in Abu Dhabi could be far more utilized for a regional play, if 100% ownership is permitted. It's tax benign, so why wouldn't someone begin to use an Abu Dhabi LLC for a much wider role? Whereas right now it's relatively unincentivized because of the current structure.
And do you think there's an awareness in the wider business community? I think you and I are based here in the United Arab Emirates, so we see this on a regular basis, so it's reported on regularly. But how much does this get back to the UK for UK companies? And does the message get through clearly? Is it diluted and they just hear what they want to hear? Do you feel that the message is clearly articulated back in the UK?
Well, it's very interesting, Ryan, because I was actually following my Andrews Curtis. I did transition back to the UK for a number of years. I'm now in the process of transitioning back down. And that has been a really interesting process in understanding the perceptions about the region. I have to say, I think, thanks to the good work of people like the EIC and SDI and DTI, the awareness level is much, much higher. But I still think, I'd like to see a higher success rate from ventures coming in. I still think the failure rate has been too high historically. So I think there's still a lot to do, a lot to learn. And, forums like this, I think, are invaluable to support that process.
Yeah, I'll agree. I think it's always great when we hear the success stories, and this afternoon we're going to hear from some UK companies in Corotherm and in fact triple award, EIC award winners, Stats Group. And these are companies that have come out and established themselves. They've done the hard yards. They've been here 10 plus years. And it's nice to see companies like that. It's also nice to see companies that established, and the likes of Flowline, who recently merged with Motive, come to mind, that have come out maybe in the last 5 or so years that they went from strength to strength. But I agree with you, there are some of the companies that slip through the gaps that maybe don't stand the test of time out here, and unfortunately retrench back, maybe sometimes too early, or maybe just the market wasn't ready for them at that point. But I agree with what you say, and I'd like to think that there's more of a suitable support network through the companies you mentioned and people like yourself to give the UK companies the best possible chance of success when they do come out here. What's your thoughts on that?
I think absolutely. There's a lot of, I mean, it would take too long to explain. For me, I can walk through the list of things I think have been, very demonstrable in terms of why ventures have succeeded and why ventures have failed. And I don't think they're failing because people are not checking out the market, or they don't come down with very attractive products, services, usually technology driven. Some of the issues tend to be perhaps local partner problems, poor selection processes, maybe the right management team hasn't been put into place, an underestimation of the timelines and the investment level needed to get to first revenues to make the business cash generative, perhaps overinvestment in whether it's people or premises, doing that a little bit too early, rephasing these things to the right for a period of time can make a huge difference on the cash flow pressures and the potential for the ventures to succeed. So there's no magic formula, but there certainly are things which have shown up, in my experience, have been repetitive as the reasons why ventures have failed or succeeded. And I think we need to learn from that.
No, I completely agree there. I'm going to change tack slightly here, Hugh, and put you on this spot a bit. Something that came into the news last week and quite prominent here. Now, you spoke earlier on about a lot of companies coming out here, headquartering their business for the region in the likes of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and that seemed to be the course, part of the course for many companies. It's easy to travel around the GCC here. The airline network is perfect, and when we can travel, it's easy. And in fact, you're seeing as many people at airports as you are, sometimes actually in the office. The recent announcement I want to talk about was that made last week in the Kingdom, where there's talk of now, in order to do business with the Saudi entities, certainly the government entities by which the majority are, you're going to have your regional headquarters in the Kingdom by the start of 2024. So it's not immediate, but this is a potential change in the offing. How do you feel that's going to impact or will play into the thinking of companies looking to come and set up here in the UAE or expand in the UAE?
My own gut feel is it will probably be, I think, less influential than perhaps the first blush at this appeared. I mean, I do think because of the localization, the ICTVA in-country value, total value added program in Saudi anyway, there's been a significant move towards businesses, setting up in Saudi Arabia to penetrate that market further. And I think it's such a huge market. You would probably need operational, presence there in any event. Now, will that detract from what's happening in the UAE? I doubt it. I think both will grow, frankly, in tandem. There may be some, losses around the edges. I know that there was pressure on some Jebel Ali-based contractors to move across to Saudi. I think these things tend to evolve in a way that companies are trying to keep clients happy, and I think they will structure their businesses accordingly. And I think increased presence in Saudi Arabia, it's been the trend for many, many years now, and I can't see that changing. And I can't see it materially damaging the UAE. Again, I made some bold and perhaps rash predictions earlier, but I may be back here in 5 years being told I was wrong. But I think the UAE is very resilient in dealing with challenges. Challenges of a competitive nature. It just seems to take them in its stride and bounce back, and I wouldn't be ruling out the UAE.
I think I echo the sentiments there you're saying about the UAE being very resilient, and they've shown that over the years. And in fact, the GCC countries have shown as well a willingness to work together. And as you allude to, you know, there are many companies that you and I know here that came out, have started facilities here in the UAE, and then over the course of time now have a second facility across in Saudi, because such is the demand coming from both client bases, you know, whether it be, if we look at it from an energy sector, you know, maybe like ADNOC or some of the ADNOC subsidiaries here, and then Aramco there in the kingdom, but there's a suitable demand for the products and services, and they put the hard yards in both countries. They've spent enough time, and I know myself, having been based in the kingdom for 2 years, you know, the work that it's involved across there. And as you mentioned, the ICTVA program, which, you know, we also have here in the UAE through ICB. But an interesting development here, and I'm sure it's one that we'll come back to over the course of the year. And I think that's why conversations like this are so interesting to me. The sun never sets on this, and I think in the Middle East it's constantly evolving, and you need to keep up to speed with what's happening in the business environment, you know, be it you know, from a commercial or legal side, and things that, and I'm sure you mentioned, you know, you went back to the UK, came back out here. Things will be very different from the time that you've come out, and I can only see that the change being constant in the years to come as well. On that note, Hugh, I'd really like to thank you for your time that you've given up for us today, and then also for the presentation. And I also like that part that you've given these predictions. It's always nice for people to give an opinion going forward. Just as a reminder, this presentation will be available to download. So Hugh's presentation will be given to you, but also the recording from today. And I would encourage any of you that want to pick up the phone or drop an email to Hugh, any questions you've got or anything you wanted to, you know, carry on the discussions that you've heard, some of the threads on here today. I'm sure Hugh and his team would be more than amenable to have those conversations with you. But Hugh, thank you very much for giving up the time. As always, it's a pleasure, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Ryan. You're very welcome. Thank you.
So it's now just left really for me to do a few final thanks in this session. I'd like to thank again the sponsors that we have. So Al Yassir, who you've heard mentioned a few times during this session. So Khaled Al-Kabazi and his team, and also David Hewitt and his team at Anderson Hauser for sponsoring today's and all the sessions that we have throughout the course of the event. The silver sponsors and bronze sponsors, and again, we've got the next session is with the contractor briefing with S&C Lavalin, but after that we've got some time to go into the exhibition, so I would encourage you to go and meet with all the aforementioned sponsors and have an opportunity to talk to them a little bit more. And to thank our supporting partners. Again, you know, we've heard throughout that this is very much, and it's not just for this event, it's for companies that are looking to come out here. Everyone you see in front of you has got something else that they can offer, some form of advice. So I would very much say to you, you know, if you're looking for contact details, we can provide you with them. But these are the types of organizations that will help give you that soft landing that was discussed earlier on. So on that note, I'd really like to thank you all for attending this session. Hopefully it was of value. It's very much a moving part, but one that you should all be aware of if you're either looking to come out here or if you're already established here, because it will impact every single business out here. So thank you for attending. Please join us for the next sessions where we have our UK leveraging the best of UK PLC to win business in the UAE. And as mentioned, our contractor briefings with S&C Lavalin, Worley, and Petrofac. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next.